Hey there, guys. All right, today we are continuing on with World War II every week. Week 6. Poland falls and China rises. October 6th, 1939. Over a month into the Second World War. Before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love you to join the Discord, follow me over at Twitch, and please do go check out the gaming channels here on YouTube. One is for edited content, and then the other is for the stream VODs. Yada, yada, yada. All that said, under a fucking minute for the intro. I'm getting better at this after 4 years of making videos. Jesus Christ. It's been that long already. Anyways, let's dive in.
October 6th, 1939. When Germany invaded Poland, everyone thought that a successful invasion would take months, even considering the might of the German army. Then the USSR also invaded, and now...
Oh, I guess what I was saying, spent a lot of time talking about yesterday, in the last video, about how, like, Poland's doing really good for themselves. By the estimates of the time, they were not. Oops. I apologize.
Now, just 1 month from the war's beginning, the Polish armed forces' resistance is at an end. I'm Indy Nidell. This is World War II. Last week, Warsaw...
One of these reaction videos, I should just, like, one day just, when we're watching it, just show up wearing a button-up and a tie and a vest, just like Indy. Not say anything about it. Just do it for one episode, too. I think I might. That'd be funny.
This is World War II. Last week, Warsaw fell to the Germans as both they and the Soviets continued their invasions of Poland. Germany and the USSR signed a treaty of friendship that partitioned Poland between them, and Adolf Hitler set his sights on Western Europe. Oddly enough, as of this week, Western Europe kind of now includes Poland. On September 30th, a new Polish government is set up in exile in Paris. Władysław Raczkiewicz is the new president, and General Władysław Sikorski, commander-in-chief of the armed forces,
Why is everyone named Vladislav?
And prime minister. Around 100,000 Polish troops managed to...
It's like I'm reading A Song of Ice and Fire. Everyone's fucking named Aegon. And also Daron. There's a lot of Darons in the lore.
Escape into either Hungary, Romania, or the Baltics, despite the efforts of the Russians and Germans. Now, I mentioned 2 weeks ago that the Polish government had crossed into Romania and been interned. That was because by issuing a proclamation for Poles to continue the fight and head to France, they were technically a belligerent regime on Romanian territory. And when the Germans protested, the Romanians complied with international law rather than risk German intervention. With now former President Ignacy Mościcki under house arrest, there was a real risk that Poland would be stuck without a government and a German puppet regime would be recognized by neutral nations. Mościcki nominates Raczkiewicz, and the first Paris meeting of the government in exile is October 2nd. Bucharest itself is flooded with Polish refugees, but most Romanian officials are pretty well disposed toward them. To leave Romania, though, you need a passport. So the Polish embassy is working overtime, and an exodus of Poles towards Yugoslavia or across the Black Sea to points further is beginning. On October 5th, Raczkiewicz sends a message to the Polish people. It is not the first time in our history that the head of state and the national government has had to take refuge from the motherland, which has been overrun by the enemy. In the course of 1,000 years, we have defended more than once our existence and Christian civilization against the thirst for conquest and oppression by Germany and against her barbarous Oriental ally. I profoundly believe that the heroic contribution of Poland to the Anglo-French coalition war will not be in vain. It will result in final victory.
Just gonna have to wait a few years to get that. Well, no, you're gonna have to wait. You're gonna have to wait about 40, 50 years to get that final victory. The British and French will get their final victory in 45. Poland, not until what, 89? Is that when they split off, or do they split off a little earlier? No, I think is it 89? Shit, I can't remember.
And speaking of the Orient and victory, those two words are quite topical this week. In China, the First Battle of Changsha ends this week. This is the first major battle of the Second Sino-Japanese War, the war between China and Japan that's been going on the past 2 years, to fall within the scope of this channel. That war is considered by many to be part of the Second World War, though Japan's not allied with Germany or anything. But the war in Europe and the war in East Asia are affecting each other, as the Soviets are dealing with both the Japanese and the Germans. After a couple years of fighting, the Chinese war has become sort of a stalemate. But the Chinese army had just had a big morale boost when the Russians and Mongolians badly defeated the Japanese at the end of August, as we saw last month, and a successful attack on the Chinese now would in turn be a much-needed morale boost for the Japanese army. And the Soviets and Japanese have recently signed an armistice. So the Japanese could put them out of the picture for the time being and focus on trying to beat the Chinese and then installing a puppet government in central China, much as they have already done in Manchuria. Japanese forces were converging on Changsha by mid-September, and the battle began the 17th. Side note here, the attacks would include poison gas. The Japanese have not signed the Geneva Protocol. By September 23rd, the Chinese had been driven from the Xinjiang River region and Changsha had been surrounded on 3 sides. By the end of September, advanced Japanese troops had reached the outskirts of the city, but they had taken heavy casualties and were in danger of overstretching their supply lines, which were being constantly harassed and were possibly in danger of being cut altogether, so they withdrew. The Chinese pursue them straight away and begin a general counterattack October 3rd. Japanese General Yasuji Okamura orders the whole offensive called off, but the Chinese shoot down the plane carrying the order. By the week's end, the Japanese are being destroyed and are in full retreat northward over the Miluo River. Within days, the Chinese will have retaken the territory they lost in Hunan, Hubei, and Jiangxi provinces.
Let's go China.
Changsha is the first major city that has managed to repel the Japanese advances. As you can imagine, it is a big boost for the Chinese nationalists, and the Japanese are foiled for the time being from consolidating their gains in southern China. But in Europe, the Polish army's resistance is coming to an end as the Germans and Russians consolidated their gains. Admiral Unrug's garrison on Hel Peninsula finally surrenders to the Germans. On the 30th, a series of landmines are detonated. This nearly cuts off the peninsula from the mainland. Unrug is determined to fight, even after the surrender of Warsaw last week, but as October rolls in, he realizes it is futile. The garrison surrenders October 2nd. The last significant Polish units surrender this week, some the 3rd near Łódź, and then the Polish Independent Operation Group the 6th after the Battle of Kotsk. The Germans have taken 700,000 prisoners of war, and the Soviets 200,000. Polish casualties are heavy, an estimated 70,000 killed and 133,000 wounded. The Germans have 10,000 dead and 30,000 wounded. The available casualty estimates from the Soviet invasion are chilling. The Red Army is said to have lost 996 men killed and 2,002 wounded, while the Poles are said to have suffered 50,000 fatalities without any figure for the wounded. Such a figure can perhaps only be explained by executions. I'm going to throw in another quote here about the German invasion that's pretty interesting. Although tank units have played a notable part in the campaign, it is interesting to note that the contemporary German official appreciations lay more stress on the traditional style infantry battles. The tank forces are seen at this stage, except by enthusiasts like Guderian, as little more than useful auxiliaries who can help the infantry do the real work. On October 4th, Adolf Hitler issues an amnesty order to German troops who have killed prisoners or civilians, presuming that they have acted from bitterness over atrocities committed by Poles. The next day, the 5th, at the victory parade in Warsaw, Hitler says to the assembled foreign journalists, "Gentlemen, you have seen the ruins of Warsaw. Let that be a warning to those statesmen in London and Paris who still think of continuing the war." Okay, that is to journalists. The day after that, as the week ends, Hitler has a major speech to the Reichstag. He talks then of his desire for peace with Britain and France. He says he has no war aims against them and up to now has only corrected the unjust Versailles Treaty. He blames warmongers like Churchill for the current state of affairs and even calls for a conference to resolve their differences. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain says that to consider this would be to forgive Germany for its aggression. He and French Prime Minister Edouard Daladier
Neville Chamberlain getting a spine? Is he standing up?
tell Hitler, no way, Jose. Okay, they don't actually say Jose, but you know what I mean. There is a conference that takes place this week, though. The second Pan American Conference is held the second, with 21 nations participating. They establish a 300-mile, 480 kilometers, security zone off the American coast. Any act of war in this zone against anyone will be interpreted as a hostile attack on America. And the war at sea is, in fact, heating up. On the 30th, the German pocket battleship Graf Spee sinks its first merchant ship, the British freighter Clement, off the coast of Brazil. On October 5th, 8 British and French hunting groups are formed to look for the Graf Spee. Now, the other pocket battleship on the loose, the Deutschland, sinks the Stonegate in the neutrality zone. Deutschland will also seize an American ship as a prize of war. This turns out to be a big mistake. Combined with the Polish invasion, this really helps turn American public opinion not just against the Germans, but against the Neutrality Acts, which banned loans or the sale of munitions to belligerents. Early next month, this will result in President Franklin Roosevelt getting a new Neutrality Act passed that allows the arms trade with belligerent nations, read Britain and France, on a cash and carry basis. The recipients will have to use their own ships, pay immediately in cash, still no loans, and assume all transportation risk. American shipping is forbidden from entering the war zone. And here are some notes to end the week. On the 2nd, the Soviets threaten an occupation if they don't get to use military bases in Latvia. 3 days later, the Latvians and the USSR sign a 10-year mutual assistance pact. The Soviets can have 25,000 men on Latvian bases. This follows a similar agreement signed
Isn't that like pretty much the entire population of Latvia?
with the Estonians last week. Lithuania is now pressured to do likewise, but they are reluctant. And as the week ends, the Finns mobilize their standing army forces. A bit more about why next week. So this week is now at its end, as is Polish armed resistance to the invaders. Well, in Poland, that is, because there is now a Polish government in Paris to continue the fight. Chinese resistance scores a big victory over the Japanese, and American resistance to the German naval campaign grows stronger. And Hitler issued an amnesty for those of his men who had killed civilians or POWs. We've seen that there had been a lot of that this first month of the war. You may think, though, that the issuing of such an amnesty means that those killings are only in the past tense. They are not. They very much continue day after day after day.
Yeah.
If you'd like to understand more of why the U.S. is on the sidelines until now, you can watch our...
And that was week 6 of World War II, October 6, 1939. Poland falls and China rises. This was our first week here where there wasn't really much to add to this one. Because a lot of it was kind of would have just been rehashing things said previously. It was just more so, yeah, to use similar phrasing that I would use during the Great War series. This was a week where, things were moving and happening, but nothing like, new that you can push forward, or expand upon really too much, that aren't necessarily, I feel, consequential to World War II. Well, I guess maybe someone could be talking about the Neutrality Acts, but ultimately I feel like the Neutrality Act kind of gets overshadowed the moment, December 7th, 1941 happens, right? I feel like there really isn't much to say about the Neutrality Act. That's just America trying to, stay the fuck out of it. Not get involved and just still profit though off of war. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.